We are live. How we doing, everybody? My name is Tyler Ward, known as Wardy to all of you. And today, here at our latest Mets live stream on the WardyNYM platform, we're going to break down trying to answer that oh so big yet simple question. Will this New York Mets team make playoffs this season? And when I say season, I most certainly mean postseason play. And speaking of the season, the Mets just have 1 week left to play as they have a 6-game gauntlet on the road for a Mets team that's right around 10 games below 500 on the road, facing the Chicago Cubs, who just got curb stomped in a 4-game set against the Reds, and Cincy being swept in all 4 games. So that is a big series, not only for the Mets, but as is the case for a Cubs team that's trying to rebound after what has been a brutal stretch as of late. Then to wrap up the season, the Mets have themselves the Miami Marlins in Miami. The Marlins have won 10 of their past 11 games at the time of us talking right now, and they may very well be on an absolute heater for the Mets in that final series, and what very well could dictate the Mets playoffs hopes or die. Let's get into all this, everybody, and everything in between. Thank you guys kindly for hitting that like and subscribe on your way, and I greatly appreciate that. In today's Mets segment, this will be right around at least a half hour long to everyone watching live on a replay, but to solely my live viewers right now, we'll probably expand to north of an hour or so that way I can answer comments, questions, and concerns, especially when we get into more of the key details here as to what the schedule is for the Mets moving forward, what it is for these opposing teams, that being obviously in the Reds, the Giants, the Arizona Diamondbacks, that we're going to break down at great length here, everybody, because as we take a look at the wild card standing, the Mets are technically out of that playoff spot. Yes, they are tied, as you see with Cincy. That probably has Cincinnati spelled wrong. If that's the case, I apologize. If not, then we're cooking. 80 and 76 apiece, but knowing the Mets do not have the tiebreaker is exactly why we're talking today about a team that's technically out of a playoff spot, trailing behind the Cincinnati Reds, and we're going to compare and contrast their schedules along with the Arizona Diamondbacks as well, and ultimately get into what exactly does this Mets team need to do to get themselves right before it's too late. Is it already too late for this Mets team? Has the ship sailed on their odds to even make postseason play? Well, latest odds that have come out today have suggested that the Mets have an over 51% chance to still make postseason play. So even though it's only by a 1 or 2%, it does appear the odds as of now are in the Mets' favor. We'll see if that holds true as the Mets kickstart that series against the Cubs tomorrow. But in the meantime, let's get into this one and let's break down everything that you guys need to know in Mets land at this point about this roster, what's going right, what most certainly continues to go wrong, what they can adjust about this team moving forward in this upcoming series against the Cubs, and everything in between. Let's get a quick roll call going, and then let's break it all down. Thank you so much for being in here. I appreciate it, guys. We got our guy Zach Flaherty in here. Our odds are like 25%. Nonsense, absolute BS. That's the funny thing about odds. They're ever changing. And even though you think that's around 25%, I don't blame any Mets fan for feeling along those lines. The odds aren't necessarily saying that it's completely out of the Mets' hands at this moment. 51% with all their games on the road is inaccurate. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, because right away I think to myself, the Mets have been horrendous on the road this year. Don't love their odds of heading into the next 2 series and steamrolling them, but at the same time, it is put up or shut up time. So it's just a matter of if the Mets can actually come together as a club and make it happen finally this season. Jack, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. We got James in here. We got Jared in here. We got Metfish in here. We got Kevin. We got NYM Mets. Our great member in the chat says, insert, so you were saying there's a chance. Oh, all the time. That's been the story of this Mets season's felt like. Even though that they've had a greater lead than now, the Mets feeling like that they have an opportunity in playoffs has not felt genuine for a good stretch of time. And that's why we've all collectively agreed, or at least I certainly have said, do I think the Mets deserve playoffs? No, most certainly not. For a team that's over 10 games below 500 going back to mid-June this season, and that's an 80-plus game sample size. That's half the year. But do I selfishly still want them to make playoffs as a fan that just wants to get a semblance of excitement of what's been otherwise a very frustrating year to follow? Absolutely. And do I think that the Mets have an opportunity to still make playoffs? Absolutely, I do. They're not completely out of the woods yet, and that is why this question has an answer. Will they make playoffs? Is possible. Is it a guarantee? Most certainly not, but we're going to get into the pros and the cons to be optimistic and certainly pessimistic about their odds here moving forward for the remainder of the calendar week. Steve, great member. Thank you so much for being being here. AJ, how we doing? Going up the list here. We got our guy Craig in the chat. John, Larry. Also, guys, if you have key comments, questions, or concerns that you would like to share with yours truly that's on par with the topics that we're discussing tonight, please make sure to not hesitate from relaying exactly that. We're going up here. We got Miguel. How are you? Webs Love, thank you so much for being in here. This Mets season is over. Very passionate about the Mets season being over. We'll get into all of that here shortly. Lisa says she is heartbroken. I'd imagine that's in hand with being a Mets fan, which I don't blame you should that be the case. We got Julian in the chat. How are you? We got Tony in the chat who says no, the Mets will not make playoffs. Jason, how are you? Peter, everyone going up the list here as well. I'm also going to set up a poll here in the live show that you guys can answer throughout the course of it. Help us get to 100 plus likes to everybody first chiming in live at a replay. I appreciate that. We're almost at 30. Continue to hit those buttons on your way in and help us get to 35,000 subscribers, because once we hit 35K for our next short-term goal on the platform, as the largest Mets platform here on YouTube, covering all things Mets from one sole content creator, yours truly, that being in Wardy, we're going to be giving away a jersey to one lucky subscriber on the platform, all for just being a subscriber. So hit those buttons if you haven't already. Thank you so much. We've already given away north of 6 jerseys this season. Every new 1,000 subscriber milestone that we hit, we give away a new form of merch, and it's a brand new jersey every single time, whatever player you currently want. But let's go ahead and let's set this up right here, right now, everybody. I'm going to start the poll, and it's going to be the simple question: will Mets make playoffs? And to all my people watching on replay, the same applies to you guys. Let me know in the comments down below, do you believe the Mets will make postseason play? But maybe don't answer that to our replay viewers until after you watch today's segment, because maybe I'm going to lean you more in one direction or another. I most certainly want to see your thoughts nonetheless. Okay. This will probably be my last spot of the year. A lot of fans are tapped out, and understandably so. And I don't blame any fan that's been tapped out with how this season has went. But let's get into this, because there's a lot that I really want to highlight here, and I think a perfect way to highlight is what has been going wrong for this Mets team. And we have said this at great length this season, so I'm going to be relatively short. I'm going to put this in as quick of a summary as I possibly can. For anyone that has not been following along for the Mets all season, or anyone that maybe is trying to figure out what exactly has went wrong for this team that's led us to getting to the current point, the position that we find ourselves in. One, if you've been living under a rock, you most certainly don't know. But secondly, maybe you just really don't understand what's been going on with this club. So let me enlighten you here in a quick summary. Okay. Where does all this happen? It happens right in front of us. And what we have seen this season is a Mets pitching staff that looked in the first half among the best in baseball, and in the second half, even before then, has been amongst the worst in baseball. Why has this been? There is 2 to 3 factors as to why. One, injuries. Between Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas injured in spring training, Montas never being the healthy pitcher that we wanted him to be, already out until 2027 with Tommy John surgery, Sean Manaea beginning the year with an oblique injury, and then, of course, trying to find himself work back, and he rushes himself back, which leads to a setback, and then he eventually returns and finds out he has a loose body in his elbow and needs surgery at the end of the offseason. He has been batting practice if he has been utilized in a reliever role, because he just has not been able to get in the proper swing of things this season. There's one thing that Manaea may be able to handle more moving forward, which is why I was as frustrated as I was yesterday with him being pulled out of that role, is his ability as a swing man lawn reliever for, say, a Clay Holmes, that of course is more of a 5-and-dive starter for you. And speaking of Clay Holmes, he and David Peterson have been more of these strongholds in this Mets rotation among the veterans. But what's also been true with all these starters is that no one has been able to provide length whatsoever. Peterson was able to do that in the first half, has done none of the sort here in the second half. When we look at Clay Holmes, the commonality with him all season long, even with the success that he has had from a reliever turned starter, is his inability to go deep into ball games. Also struggles to have a put-out pitch at times as well. Sometimes it doesn't matter, and other times it does, when he then finds himself walking 4 batters in a ball game and it's out of there in 4.2 innings. Like, that is not good enough. When we look at more on the injuries, Kodai Senga, who started this season brilliant for this Mets team, he has not been the same man since then. And we're going to defer to a segment that I had with the New York Post here in just a second to relay more on Kodai Senga, what the X factors could be for the Mets moving forward, because listen, they don't have a lot of options left, as we know, but Senga along with Manaea were dependent, us being dependent rather, the fans and this team, for them to be the aces of this ball club. And unfortunately, they fell flat on their face in their ability to do so, headlined by a lack of health this season. But Kodai Senga, especially as a man who has been a shell of himself from returning from that latest injury that he sustained earlier this season. Because of that, Senga not being the guy you need him to be, batting practice, that's a problem that you put him out there for a normal starts and rotation for a month and a half before making a decision of sending down. Then you look at Griffin Canning, ruptures his Achilles after far exceeding expectations for the most part this season. Yes, he had a couple blunders, including a start against the White Sox that he didn't perform well, but at the same time, more often than not, Canning was reliable for us and was at a point the most reliable starter in this Mets rotation that we saw in the first half. So it's very unfortunate to see him go down, as was the case with Tyler McGill, who is likely not going to pitch again until 2027, as he's expected to get Tommy John surgery now. The list goes on and on with injuries. The point stands is that when you have a rotation that had an abundance of depth to begin the season, but didn't necessarily have a lot of quality, then loses all that depth and doesn't get the quality from the guys that were supposed to provide quality, that leads them into really a position that a lot of teams can't take themselves out of. And thankfully for the Mets, they had a 21 game above 500 cushion to help them before they completely dug the hole that they've led to this point. But it's been a cultivation in the pitching. It's been a cultivation of an offense that's completely been lackluster. It's in its consistencies this season, I should be saying. And a heavy factor has been in hand with the philosophy. Whether it has been what Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes have not done right, whether it has been a lack of a voice in the clubhouse versus what we saw last year, was it a lack of aura, a lack of momentum, a lack of vibes, a lack of excitement that you got with a Jose Iglesias-led team in certain ways last season that the Mets were really able to rally around, that JD Martinez helped make possible? You know, these are all things that we ponder because we've seen a lifeless team for the majority of the year where there has been a lack of aura. There's been a lack of excitement. It's felt like that there's been something missing all season long, even while the Mets have had their semblances of success. We get on to the management, right? David Stearns sat on his hands, was conservative after we saw Montas and Manaea down before the season even began, decided not to bring back a Jose Quintana, who has been looking fantastic this season and a nice solid role for the Milwaukee Brewers. Color me shocked. It almost seemed like it made sense to return him at the time, yet we chose not to because of the fact of how much him and his baseline salary with the tax that Steve Cohen would have to deal with just wasn't outweighing the upside with someone like and Quintana, when in reality the Mets would be absolutely beyond ecstatic if they had a guy like Jose Quintana this season with what he's been able to continue to do in the latter half of his career. So sitting on his hands certainly hurt, as well as every acquisition that he made to return this season, as well as new guys, have completely failed. There has been little to no players that David Stearns brought in for 2026 that actually have panned out. AJ Minter went down a month in the season with a season-long injury. We saw other key acquisitions like Jose Siri go down with a leg injury that's had him out the majority of the year. Now he's back, but we know he can't hit a beach ball. Then you look at and can't defend either, which is a major problem. That's why you trade for him to be the Harrison Bader replacement. You look at the aspects of the rotation, and Griffin Canning was one of the few things to work. You can definitely credit him for that. Clay Holmes has been solid. I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk of a deal, but not the worst thing either. But beyond that, there really is slim pickings as to what David did right heading into this season. And even bringing back Jesse Winker failed because then we had the mismanagement by Carlos Mendoza. Mendy thinking it was the right idea to put a guy who is not known for playing his defense because he's not a good defender, and Jesse Winker in left field that he had not played at all last season for the New York Mets. And the first play he makes playing in left field that we saw this year in a doubleheader, the first half against the St. Louis Cardinals, the first attempt of a defensive play he made all season was his last play he ever made for the New York Mets, probably ever in his career. He went down with injury with a grade 2 oblique strain. He came back, and the same day he came back, he went down with back tightness, and he's needed a bunch of shots there. His back is all shot up. It's all messed up. He's still with the team vibing, but Jesse Winker, a guy who brought the vibes last year, now is only a guy who can bring vibes because he can provide no offensive production for you as he's out for the season. You look at the guy that was supposedly supposed to replace Jose Iglesias, that being Nick Madrigal, who broke his shoulder on the first play he made in spring training this year and had him out, in which the Mets decided to defer to the kids, and that's okay. But when we look at Carlos Mendoza, and this is the final thing I'll say as to a wrap as to how he got to where we've gone to this point, Mendy has been so behind the 8 ball in more ways than one with his in-season decision-making that it's been underwhelming. And you can give him a justified benefit of the doubt in certain instances with the pitching being an issue. It is not Carlos Mendoza's fault that everybody and their mother got hurt out of this rotation this season, nor is it his fault when the Mets have had to utilize 46 pitchers and counting, the most pitchers ever utilized by any team in Major League Baseball history this season under David Stearns, because this is more of the Stearns philosophy, injury-filled and all. The Mets have had some of the most injuries to pitching in all baseball. They're doing their best Dodgers impression in that regard, and I believe the Mets have the most Tommy John injuries this season as well, or close to. Maybe they're just trailing the Dodgers. So I know Steve Cohen was adamant on becoming more of the East Coast Dodgers, but can we let the injuries stay out west? That would be fantastic, because now the Mets find themselves in a very unfortunate position. After being, again, a bottom 5 team in baseball going back to mid-June, anywhere from 10 to 17 games below 500. It's been that bad right now. They now find themselves in a 6-game gauntlet beginning tomorrow against the Chicago Cubs, a team that has every right in the world to want to come out guns a-blazing against this Mets team, given the lack of success the Mets have had this year, as well as the recent lack of success the Cubs have had, not wanting to finish the season heading into postseason play on a sour note. And then as we get into that Miami Marlins series, as I mentioned, they are red hot right now, so we're going to expand more on everything that you need to know there. But what I will tell you guys wholeheartedly is that the Mets have themselves a battle, and if they want to get anywhere this season, if they really want to make a name for themselves here in postseason play, they're going to have to do things that they have not done all season long. And that's it's a tall thing to ask for a Mets team that has played as mediocre as they have the past 3 months. But this is all we can long for and all ask for at this point in time, because there is no other ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's put up or shut up time. We have been saying this for a while, and we'll say it again. That's why this past series against the Nationals was as important and as imperative as it was. The Mets need to go out there and put their best foot forward, and they most certainly did anything but be on the first game of a victory. And even when the Mets won that ball game, it wasn't maybe as comfortable as you'd like it to be to certain aspects. There's been a lack of a vibe from this Mets team this year, and it goes without saying, but it's not the end of the season yet. And all it takes is one dramatic victory to get this team to rally around something. They were so close to doing it against the Nationals, yet they fell short. They tied in the 9th inning. The first time, if I'm not mistaken, the Mets even tied a ball game in the 9th inning this year, yet they were not able to secure the ultimate lead. They stranded runners at third base with less than 2 out, and the rest is history. They went on to lose that game 5-3. Then the Mets had another opportunity that we just saw where they could have secured the series again, and they couldn't get one single run in the 9th inning. I've felt this all season long. I think you guys can do as well. The Mets are just one big hit, one big dramatic moment away from finally rallying around something. Because if there's been one commonality that we have seen with this Mets team throughout the entire course of the season, I would love to know if you guys agree or disagree with in this regard. So let me know as you guys hit that like and subscribe on your way, and as we break down if the Mets will or will not make playoffs this year and what is next for them in their final week of regular season play for the MLB year. Going back to this one, everybody, there's a lot of aspects to this team that are things that are frustrating. And when we take a look at, not only the final week here, but ultimately how they match up against these other teams, this is where I don't know how much I can even lean into the fact on they have to take advantage of the competition. Because the one thing that we have seen, and I'll go back to my initial point in a second. Actually, I'll say this now, then I'll go back to my point. The commonality that we have seen with this Mets team all year is that they haven't had that big moment. That's what I meant to say a minute ago, and then my mind went, do. And that big moment has been so severely lacking. We have seen slivers of it. We have seen some dramatic home runs for the Mets this year. The Mets have had a lot of home runs this year, as a matter of fact, more than I feel like we have seen in recent years. And I'm sure that's true, especially with Juan Soto being here leading the charge. The fact that they haven't had those true dramatics and ways that we have seen in years past, I do find to be concerning. Because when you have the lack of drama and you play stale baseball, it continues. And the same way that winning is contagious is the same way that losing and having, just gray baseball, just not good looking, just stuff you watch on, a Sunday day game, but it's cloudy, it's overcast, and just not a great day at the ballpark because you're just not getting a whole lot of output. And, maybe I'm going a little too harsh on the team because I know that they've had their respective moments this season. But at the same time, we can't sit here and say, oh, we have all these things to be happy and reflect on this year. If your name is not Juan Soto, I really don't think we have a lot to lean in on and say, wow, this Mets team, there's a lot to be loving about this season. I think you can make that rightful argument about what's happening in the minor leagues from Port St. Lucie all the way up to AAA. Absolutely. There's a lot to love. And speaking of AAA, the one commonality there with the Mets currently is what the young horses and Ton, Sproat, and McClain have been able to provide. So yes, you can make an argument there that too is a positive, but outside of that, it's slim pickings with how this season has went. And I think most fans, including myself, will fall in the same category should they not be able to ultimately have a nice playoff run here that we're all hoping to see, is this will most certainly be a year to forget. Like, it's going to be hard to forget, but we're going to absolutely love to forget a season like this. We will be chomping at the bit to get set for 2026 to make significant moves on the roster, potentially not just player personnel, but front office, coaching staff. And I'm not saying that all those things will happen. I'm just saying I know how the fans will be. Hoorah, we got to make changes. I, however, certainly hope we do not fall in that category yet. And I think that there is still absolutely a world where the Mets don't, because as I've said, the Mets have leaned heavily on their 21 game above 500 cushion here in the second half when they played as mediocre as they have. While that is true, they still have 2 series left to control their destiny. And it really does feel that they have a great opportunity to control it, even though technically it's out of their control. And the reasons for this begin with the following. As I stated, we have seen the Chicago Cubs not play their best baseball as of late. Now, granted, when the Mets go into Chicago, they're usually solid series, and we've seen the Mets win in Chicago plenty in the past. But the same way that we have seen Chicago win plenty in the past is also the same. The Mets win there is the same way that we know that the Cubs are now a different team. Craig Counsell has them right versus where he had them wrong a season ago. And when we take a look at the Chicago Cubs this season right now, they're coming off of being swept over their past 4 games. And before that, they swept the Pittsburgh Pirates. And before that, they won 2 out of 3 against the Rays. They won 2 out of 3 against the Atlanta Braves. And then they lost the series to the Nationals. So there's something that, the Cubs and the Mets have in unison this year, is that they don't know how to play against the Nationals to save their life somehow, some way. The Cubs, however, have been playing much better baseball this season overall than the Mets, even with them not having the strongest second half in parts. Pete Armstrong has not nearly looked as good in the second half as he did, looking like an MVP caliber player in the first half there for Chicago, the former Mets outfield prospect. But this series begins here with David Pearson toeing the rubber against Horton, the right-hander, and his sub-3 ERA there for the Cubs. Game 2 is going to be Matthew Boyd for the Chicago Cubs, who's having a really good year, the crafty southpaw, who I'd imagine will be facing Jonathan. It's not official by the Mets yet, but it looks like it's probably going to be Ton barring changes, which means Thursday, barring changes, should be Noel McClain for the New York Mets here in the series finale there in Chicago, and that is going to be against Colin Ray, and Colin Ray has been one of the more susceptible pitchers to actually get beat up on in this series, but I disregard that. It's not going to be Colin Ray. It's going to be Shota Imanaga, which I don't love. Imanaga, we know when crafty, can be a really, really good pitcher, and he's had his plenty of success this season. The good news is that he hasn't really been going deep into games all that much. He's been more of a 5-and-dive starter that we have seen as of late, but he has been pretty solid in those outings, giving like 3 earned runs or less that he's typically giving up. So not the best, not the worst either, but a southpaw. We know how it goes with this Mets team. They're either going to look brilliant or they're going to look like they're facing Randy Johnson yet again, even though Randy has been in the game in a hot minute. So that's what the Mets have upcoming when we look at their immediate series against the Chicago Cubs. And of course, that is really a coin flip. You can argue as to who's going to win that series. But there's something going in favor of the Cubs here versus what is not going in favor of the Mets, unfortunately, is when we take a look at where these teams stand at home versus on the road. Because Chicago currently this season has a home record of 46-29. That is certainly one of the better ones in baseball at 17 games above 500. Whereas the New York Mets are 49-32. So they have one of the best records in all baseball at home. But the unfortunate news here is that the Mets are even worse than I could have possibly imagined on the road. The Mets are 31-44 this season on the road. And that's beyond embarrassing. And the fact that they have been this bad on the road for this long leaves me to believe they're probably going to continue that trend unless they finally decide to wake up now. What is a do or die series? Let's be realistic. The Mets have 3 games in Chicago against the Cubs. The Pirates are next up against the Cincinnati Reds. The Pirates, even while having strong pitching matchups, the issue is Paul Skeens is matching up against fellow ace, fellow dominant, fellow flame-throwing right-hander in his early 20s, that being in Hunter Green, and what will be the pitching matchup of the week across Major League Baseball more than likely. So the idea that, we can lean on Paul Skeens and the Pirates to get the job done against this Reds team doesn't feel like it's likely. In my humble opinion, should the Mets be able to muster 2 games out of 3 against this Chicago Cubs team, it is going to come down to that final series to dictate who makes playoffs. And the Arizona Diamondbacks are a game behind, but the Diamondbacks record, who the Diamondbacks are playing still, is why I'm not going to fully commit to them yet as, they're a greater threat currently than the Reds. It goes without saying that the Reds are the greater threat at the moment, but the Diamondbacks have been playing tremendous baseball, even after being sellers by parting ways with Josh Naylor and Eugenio Suarez. But they have the most difficult remaining schedule out of any of these contending teams in the National League right now. So when we look at a team like the Cincinnati Reds, what is next up for them, you might wonder? Well, what's next up for the Reds here, everybody? We're halfway to 100 likes. Thank you guys so much for that. Continue to smash that like and subscribe on your way, and I greatly appreciate that. What's next up here for the Cincinnati Reds is the Pittsburgh Pirates, as we just mentioned, and then after that Pirates series, their final series of the year is against the Milwaukee Brewers. And that right there might be the time that the Mets and us fans say to ourselves, oh my God, we're rooting for Milwaukee. Who would have thought that is the role we find ourselves in right now? Because the Brewers are looking like the best team in the National League this year. They're on pace for 100-plus wins. We know this. They're looking really, really good. And Milwaukee, with a team that, the Mets were able to kick out in postseason play last year, have a chip on their shoulder this year because they're a team that continues to struggle to get over the hump, which is doing well in postseason play. But I'm sure they want to finish this season strong. And while there is a part of me that is thinking, could the Brewers not start some of their key players in the final series of the year? But at the same time, they're going to be getting comfortably that first round bye because they won't be in the wild card. Why would they go ahead and do that? So going with the idea that the Brewers will come out guns a-blazing and have their normal strong lineups in there for the final series of the regular season, I'm led to believe that that is going to be the best opportunity for the Mets to make postseason play. If we're just basing on immediate schedule moving forward between what the Mets have or the next 3 versus what the Pirates have, and then versus the Pirates, not the Pirates, the Reds, and the final 3. And for the final 3 for the Mets, it's the Miami Marlins. Now, I can't say that with comfortability because if there's one thing we know about this Mets team, it's that they've had a lot of blunders in Miami in years past. We have seen countless times this Mets team not play to expectation against a team just like Miami, as they have done so similarly with the Washington Nationals this season. Bearing in mind, that you're on the road in Miami, normally playing a team like the Marlins should not have you shaking in your boots. But when the Marlins have been as fantastic as they have here in the month of September, and have played far superior baseball in the second half than the first half, yes, naturally could lead some cause for concern for us fans who know that they're playing with house money. They have nothing. There's nothing for the Marlins to lose. They only have to gain. And that's potentially be the stopper of the Mets making the postseason this year. And the very frustrating aspect about that is if you're Miami, why wouldn't you want to do everything in your power to make sure that becomes a reality? And if you're the Mets, you say to yourselves, you're the better team on paper. You're twice the team on paper, or at least you should be. Go out and perform like it. This is a week that's so make or break, do or die, that we may really see Juan Soto continue to do everything in his power to single-handedly carry this team. Soto has done that in various ways that we have seen the second half this year. But the rate that Juan is on with his dominance, do not be surprised if he looks like a man possessed the final week of baseball. I do not think it'll be for a lack of effort whatsoever in regards to Juan Soto and his capability in getting this team in the right direction. But where I am most concerned is with Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor. Now, Alonso has fantastic numbers in Wrigley Park. We have seen in Wrigley Field. We have seen Alonso dominate in his career there. And I'm going to double check right now, as a matter of fact, just to show you guys Pete Alonso's splits every time he's in Chicago, because they're very good. Francisco Lindor, though, we're going to talk about this because This comes down in a lot of ways, and I know it's a terrible thing to say because you don't want to come down to one player. It doesn't come down to just one player, but a lot of it goes in hand, everybody, with what happens with Francisco Lindor. Francisco Lindor has been so Jekyll and Hyde in his home versus away production this season that if Lindor cannot produce the way that we need him to here for this remaining stretch of the season, it will not at all be shocking if the Mets do find themselves not making postseason play because he was not able to be that leader that we've been longing for him to continue to be this season. And again, it's not all on his shoulders. I understand that. But at that same time, in that same breath, he is viewed as many as the captain of this team and as someone that they really ride through. And I don't know if that's changed to a degree because of how Juan Soto has been now the best player on the team or whatever the case may be. But we need to see Francisco Lindor lock in on the road, something that he has not done. Now, when we talk about these matchups, what do we see? Pete Alonso in Chicago against the Cubs has splits of the following, everybody. Let's relay them in 3, 2, 1. Once I can find it. Here we go. At Wrigley Field, Pete Alonso has played 17 games there, 74 plate appearances. He has a whopping 8 home runs, 18 RBIs, 271 average, 405 on base, 729 slug for 1,134 OPS. So Pete Alonso was a guy that should be able to benefit by, as Zach is saying here, see where Wrigley's wind blows. Absolutely. Alonso should be able to lift the baseball well in this park like he has done in the past. God willing, because we need him to step up massively in this series. But it comes down in a lot of ways, as I mentioned, to Francisco Lindor. And I know you guys don't want to necessarily hear this because you're saying to yourself, it can't come down to Lindor. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but unfortunately, the Mets have been dying by the sword that has been him with his drastic splits. There isn't a doubt in my mind that the Mets would be above 500 on the road if Francisco Lindor was able to perform similarly to what he's been doing at home this year. But he has been way too drastic in that regard. When we take a look at Lindor's splits currently, everybody, he knows how to thrive when he hears My Girl and when he hears, ain't no mountain high enough. But when he's on the road and hearing the Boo Birds, even when he's hearing the fans, it just has not translated. At home this season, Francisco Lindor, 81 games, 19 home runs, 49 RBIs, 13 stolen bases, a 318 batting average, a 385 on base, and a 541 slug, good for a 926 OPS. He is currently batting, when taking a look at how he's done at home, 30 to 40% above league average, just for some key context. When we take a look at what he has done on the road, it has not at all been the same circumstance. On the road, we have seen 73 games. Yes, he has 9 home runs, 31 RBIs, 18 stolen bag. He has a 211 average, a 299 on base, and a 364 slug. That is a 662 OPS, everybody, and that is currently well below league average. I mean, we're talking north of 30% below league average in comparison. When, mind you, oh, these ads. Hold on one second, everybody. There we go. Okay, Baseball Reference. Maybe don't shove, 10 ads straight in my face when I'm just trying to use your website. My goodness, my God, my gracious, what is going on here? Anyways, point stands. Lindor's OPS points, almost 300 difference from home to away. And that's a massive problem. And he's not the only one that's had drastic home and away splits. Another one actually has been to a degree in Brett Beatty, but I'm curious if Brett's have been stagnant in the sense that they haven't really changed much since the last time I checked them, or if they're a little bit better now. I'm going to go ahead and check them, but this is where I defer to every one of you guys watching live on a replay right now. Do you think the Mets, headlined by Francisco Lindor, can finally get themselves right on the road here for this gauntlet to end the season? I say gauntlet because regardless of what these teams have done or haven't done of recent, every game, every series now is a gauntlet for this Mets squad because they have proven their inability to separate themselves against good teams versus bad teams. They've had bad series against both good teams and bad teams this season, has been way too consistent on that front. And Brett Beatty, as I mentioned, he has looked so good in the second half. He's been batting right around 860 OPS here in the second half, batting north of 300. But what we see at home has been a fantastic Brett Beatty versus a Brett Beatty on the road that has been a shell of himself. And this is another factor as to why we need a guy like him to step up. Mark Vientos, who we know has solid home road splits usually, not that drastically different. Mark is a guy who I could see the ball flying with here in the series in Chicago for these night games especially. But for Brett Beatty, he's another guy. Him and Lindor, guys that we're relying on. Beatty at home, 12 home runs, 31 RBIs in 73 games, 298 batting average, 361 on base, 510 slug, 870 OPS. Brett Beatty's batting right around the same as Lindor, over 30% above league average at home this season. When you look on the road, 54 games for Beatty, smaller sample size, 5 home runs, 16 RBIs, and we're looking at a 199 batting average, a 255 on base, a 335 slug, a 590 OPS, and he's batting 40% below league average. That is way too drastic. You guys see that? You see how absurd that is that I just relayed your way? This is pretty much on par with what's been going on with Lindor, and that's a massive problem. So when we look at what are the adjustments that the Mets need to make for this final week of baseball, they need their guys who have not been there on the road to finally be there on the road. BC, how you doing in the chat? Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate that. But that's why I defer to you guys. You know, when we look at how drastic these splits have been with valuable batters in this lineup, we say to ourselves, can the Mets get this team right? Can they finally figure it out? And we can't rely on what has been in the past this season, because if we rely on the past will tell us that no, the Mets will not able to be that team that we are hoping that they can be. They can't get themselves out of that rut. As I mentioned, they have to be a baseball club that has been different than what they have done for the majority of the season. And I realize that's a tall task when you've already played 150 games or so. But you still need to put up or shut up, and they're not eliminated yet, so we have to talk about all these possibilities. And another player who could certainly provide more on the road versus what he has done at home. He has a 100-point drop-off in his OPS from home versus away. That's WardyNYM, and not as drastic as the others, which is good, but still another guy that we should be getting more out of. What we have seen in Brandon as well here has been a guy who hasn't performed to the same degree with the power in the second half. He's not even at a 400 slug here in the second half this season, which hurts when his on base is only at 326. He's not the WardyNYM that had a pushing north of a 400 on base that the Mets helped sign him to his 8-year extension for. Instead, we get a guy who at home this season in 77 games has a 279 average, a 339 on base, a 470 slug, and that includes 14 home runs, 52 RBIs, and almost 20% above league average. On the road, he is north of 10% below league average because he has in 72 games just 10 home runs, 36 RBIs, a 240 average, a 307 on base, and a 400 slug for a 707 OPS. So Alonso is actually one of the guys that I'm most confident in heading into this upcoming series for the things I had just relayed, regardless on how drastic his home and road splits have been, just because I know history has really won in his favor in this specific ballpark they're going to. But you then look at the rest of this, and the Mets need to make sure one very simple thing does not happen in this series, and it might be a tall task as well, and that is to provide the defensive blunders that we see in the outfield. P. Armstrong's going to do laps around you when it comes to great defensive play. Don't worry about it. Worry about what you can control. And what you can control is Jose Siri not looking like a dunce in the outfield the way he did this past week. The way that Cedric Mullins continues to be behind the 8-ball, not only with his bat-to-ball skills, but now his defensive range, and making him more and more unvaluable by the day. Tyrone Taylor is another man now who will be entering the fold. Do not be surprised when the Mets officially activate him tomorrow. And I will be talking about that in content that will be dropping tomorrow, so be on the lookout for it. Tyrone Taylor is someone that the Mets are going to be more reliant on than we were hoping or anticipating for, but he did look solid in his rehab outings that we saw in Allentown at the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs Stadium, Coca-Cola Park, against those Pigs for the Syracuse Mets, and we will see if he can transition what we know to be great defense and great base running at minimum, and a guy who can hunt those fastballs plenty. Let's see if TT gets a start or so in this series. I'd imagine he will, and I'd actually certainly imagine that he gets a start against Shota Imanaga to wrap up this series if he doesn't get them prior. So Tyrone Taylor, a guy that we haven't been wanting to be, a guy that we're relying on to step up. We kind of need him to step up now in this gauntlet for the Chicago series, should he get the call, and I fully anticipate him to get exactly that. Now, when we look at not only defense that needs to be accounted for, we look at the rotation. As I mentioned, the Mets are going to be having potentially Jonathan Game 2 as well as Noah McLean Game 3. the Mets have to do everything in their power not only to make sure that they do not waste these opportunities, but for Jonathan specifically, knowing he's going to be a ballpark that flies at night, he needs to do everything in his power to just stay calm, cool, and comfortable. It's not as much his fault as it is the Mets' current circumstance. Should he not perform well, he's a 22-year-old top pitching prospect who is not supposed to be here yet, but his great performance along with the Mets' incompetence and their depth of their rotation is why he is here now. Noel McLean is a man who should be getting a win every single time out there, yet is not getting them every single time out there because the Mets are not doing enough. The Mets need to make sure that they do not waste his outing, because if the Mets do waste good pitching outings, they are going to be unbelievably royally FUCKED, because then you have your final series of the year in Miami, and who knows how fickle or how strong Mets pitching is going to be then, and who knows how the Mets are even going to be able to handle the pitching of a Marlins team that are likely going to have at least 1, 2, if not 3 of Yuri Perez, Sandy Alcantara, Edward Cabrera, all guys who can carve up the Mets on any given day without a problem. So that's what we currently have in regards to the Mets upcoming. And when we talk more about can this Mets team make playoffs, we know they can make playoffs. We all know they can make playoffs. But will they make playoffs is a different discussion. And continue to smash that like and subscribe on your way, everybody, because now let's defer to exactly what can be an X factor for them, if at all, to get themselves right for postseason play before it's too late.
Happen. We're not seeing that this year. And because of that, and it's like I'm telling you, you already know, there's boos at Citi Field. There's fan frustration. So you mentioned Lindor being a leader. Sometimes it's the captain, the player has to step up, maybe kind of try and galvanize the team. But what do you think Carlos Mendoza and David Stearns need to do, I guess, differently this final week to get this team going? Like, are there any moves that could be made that maybe they haven't tried just yet to spark something within this final week?
I would say at this point in time, there's only one true uncertainty when it comes to maybe finding a spark, and that's Kodai Senga. You know, I was in attendance. Senga pitched his second game there against the Lehigh Valley Iron Pigs, the Phillies affiliate there in Allentown over the past couple of days. And he got rocked and was out of there in right around 3.2 innings. And that's a problem because the Mets have been reliant on guys initially heading into the season like Kodai and like Shamanaya to be their aces of this rotation. Yet we sit here talking today, you know, getting closer to the end of the year now, obviously, a week left. And Shamanaya looks nothing more than a reliever option for you. Kodai Senga looks like someone that at best you can have as a reliever option right now. So what is the uncertainty with someone like Kodai? That is yet to be seen, as if the Mets can get him right in time over this next week, as he'll be reportedly pitching there that we're going to see in Florida now that the Syracuse Mets season has come to an end. Pair that with Tyrone Taylor. And I know it's kind of crazy to say this because Tyrone felt like he really couldn't hit much of a baseball for a 2-month span this summer, but he started to heat up until his hamstring injury. Then he had a child, him and his wifey. Congratulations to them. And now he will be back with this Mets team more than likely for their upcoming series beginning tomorrow at the time of us talking. The Mets have had no stability in their center field whatsoever. Cedric Mullins has costed them games, it's felt like, defensively, as has most certainly been the case in Jose Siri, who has been more of a liability than anything else since returning from pretty much his season-long leg injury. Goes without saying, the Mets need to fortify these respective areas, because if they don't, then it's hard to envision them getting where they want to be down the stretch here. And to add just one little sliver as to what I think Carlos Mendoza should be doing as Mets manager, I can't sit here and tell you that he should be doing something that he hasn't done all season long. It just hasn't worked. The lack of voice has been completely apparent. And even while these guys have been properly preparing for every game, they have relayed, oh, we have the talent on the roster. I mean, talent's great and all, but talent's fickle when you can't bring this talent together in unison. They were able to do such a great job of that a year ago, building around the excitement of Mr. OMG and Jose Iglesias, a veteran JD Martinez that spoke in Mendy's ear to say, hey, we should call up Iglesias. You can tell that the Mets are lacking maybe more of that, not only veteran leadership, but just that feel, that in-game feel that we haven't seen for the majority of the season. And that's where it really is up to not only Mendoza, but this entire team to come together and say, hey, we have a week left of baseball to play. It's out of our hands with playoff control. Let's go out there and put forth our best effort, different than what we have done so far this season. You have to go in there playing a little loose, having some high risk, high reward, because if you play conservative, you're going to find yourself dropping potentially for your next 6 games and most certainly not cracking playoffs this year.
All right, so look.
Alrighty, folks, if you want to check out my entire segment there with the New York Post, and especially my guy Brandon London, head over to the New York Post Sports YouTube channel and look up the video that says Mets star players have to own historic collapse. And that is obviously should the season come to an official close and the team does not crack postseason play. But we are here to talk about both the optimism and the pessimism that comes with the Mets and their ability to make playoffs. And as I take a little sneak peek into the poll right now, we have 66% of you guys in the chat do believe the Mets are not going to make playoffs. And I put the options as yes, they will, and playoffs, ha 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 ha. And out of roughly 300 votes currently, it is far more in favor of the Mets not making postseason play, which, you know, when you look at the current standing of where the Mets are at right now, you might say to yourself, maybe you're being too harsh on them. You know, they're same wins, same losses as the Reds, just that tiebreaker's a difference. But as I relayed, you only have 2 series left this season. They have to put up or shut up. You know, like every fan has every rightful reason to be pessimistic right now. And I talked at great length already to begin the show on why you should have every reason to be pessimistic. But now it's long overdue. Let's talk about the reasons why you should be optimistic. And the simple reason as to why you should be optimistic on the Mets making postseason play is because even though we have not seen something click all season long, it feels like it's going to come. And let's not forget, this New York Mets team a year ago, when they dominated all summer long and had everything going right imaginable, they had to play an extra day when everyone else had their season over and needed to secure one final victory in a 2-game doubleheader to dictate their postseason fate. That Mets team got themselves a late game home run to ultimately prevail in that doubleheader against the Braves. And if it wasn't for that home run, if it wasn't for finally being able to get something going after Schoenbach dominated for so long, that team would have made postseason play. And we would have never looked back on 2024 and said to ourselves, oh, the 2024 Mets, that was a great season. Because as electric as the in-season was, not a single fan would give a rat's you-know-what if they didn't make the postseason. What did the Mets do in the postseason last year? That speaks for itself. And I'm not saying that the Mets are better equipped for that to happen again on the pitching front, because you could rightfully argue that they are not. You can say that they are on paper when you look at their offense, headlined by Juan Soto, kind of a big deal there. But you understand the pros and the cons here. So for the Mets to get all the way to the final game of the season a year ago, even with all the success they had throughout the summer, to have that one final game be the differentiator is exactly why you should still have the utmost faith in the making postseason play this year. Even with everything that has went wrong to this point, even with everything that has went wrong here over the past 3.5 months, they still are as close to in control as they can possibly be. Not in full control anymore, and it's unfortunate for that, but if they win more than they lose here, if they can win 4 of their next 6 games, God willing, and I think that's what they will need at minimum to make postseason play here, it is not out of the realm of possibility. The Mets won 4 out of 5 games until they just lost this series against the Nationals. The Mets previously also lost 6, 7+ games, 8 games in a row. We know that 1 week can be a great week or 1 week can be a terrible week. All we need in what is a roller coaster 162 is for this week to be a great week for the New York Mets. Will they go out and do it? That is yet to be seen, but can they go out and actually perform the way that we're hoping to see? I do think they can, and they're going to have to heavily rely on their great young pitching. Their pitching is going to need to continue to step up, which is a lot on their shoulders. So if they do not perform as we hope or expect, this is just the nature of the beast when you're relying on uncertainties of rookies in a playoff race that you have yourselves to blame, that you got yourself to this point. When you look at the bullpen, can we get more consistency out of Ryan Helsley? Can the Mets get more dominance out of their bullpen the way that we really have seen as of late from a lot of their key guys there? It's certainly possible. They need it. If they don't get it, it's hard to envision that they go anywhere. And lastly, the offense. Juan Soto, Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Francisco Lindor, Francisco Alvarez, Mark Vientos, Sterling Marte, Jeff McNeil, Tyrone Taylor, Jose Siri, Cedric Mullins, and yes, you heard that, Cedric Mullins, Luis Torrens, Luis Angel Acuna, Ronnie Mauricio, even though I do believe Ronnie will be the corresponding move for Tyrone Taylor, barring changes, everybody else in company. When I take a look at everybody that's a part of this team right now moving forward, it's time to wake up. Do you want this season to end on such a sour note? Do you want to really have it where you look back on a 2025 season and you say to yourself, we had one of the largest payrolls in baseball, and for the second time in 3 years, we couldn't even make postseason play for Steve Cohen? Is that really the label that you want to have, Francisco Lindor? Is that really the label that you want to carry heading into another free agency offseason, Pete Alonso? Is that really something that you want to be known as your first year as a New York Met, Juan Soto? Is that really something that you want to look back on, knowing that this will be your final year as a New York Met, barring changes, Jeff McNeil? Is this something that you really want to be the case when the core will be broken with you and your friends, Mark Vientos, Brett Beatty, Ronnie Mauricio, Luis Angel Acuna? Because they will not all be back here next season. Is this something that you really want to see, Edwin, in what very well could be your final season as a New York Mets reliever, because you may choose greed over staying in Queens? These are things that these players, I'm sure, are pondering, but they need to simply answer and fast, because the Mets have no more time to waste. They literally have 6 games left this season. The only thing that they have in front of them that is a positive that you can say is that they are only basically a half game, a full game out from the Reds having the tiebreaker. But that's that. It might be a game difference. They have to go out and continue to win. It's as simple as that at this point in the season. And should they be able to get in, should they be able to do damage, should they be able to do what we have longed and hoped for as fans, then they may be able to finally rewrite the ship here, rewrite the story, and give us something positive to look back on, and what we say, hey, it was an absolute slog of a season to watch, but man, did they finish on such a great note. And even though I know for most a great note will be nothing short of a World Series, and that's okay, I understand that, I think for many, including myself, a great note would be if this team could actually show a semblance of life and ability to step up in the clutch in postseason play, even in a year where they had so many things going wrong. I think that would say so much about their character, their ability to finally step up when it matters most. Yes, it took them playing horrendous and not stepping up the majority of the season, but that also means little to nothing at the end of the day. If you just go ahead and do what us fans watch the entire 160-game season to be a part of, and that is a special postseason run. That is why there's not a single fan that's complaining about 2024, nor is there a reason as to why a Mets fan, would look back on this year in complete negativity if they gave us a really good lasting memory. That's the beauty about baseball. As many games as you play, as frustrating as it can be to watch, or in the case of myself, watch and cover for a living, it all can just turn on its head so quick and so fast that a coin flip dictated the Mets making playoffs last year when they were the best team for pretty much a 3-month span. Whereas this year, the Mets have been a bottom 5 worst team in baseball over a 3-month plus span. And all they need is to get in, and they very well could go ahead and do something very magical that we have not seen at all this season. So that is where my optimism will continue to lie, because the beauty about baseball is just as much as it is talent-filled, it is most certainly luck-filled. And the Mets just need some things to go in their way the way that unfortunately has not went in their way for what's felt like the majority of the season. So until then, I will see you guys all tomorrow. We will all be having a video dropping on the platform as well as a post-game live show. And between then, I will be live on the Playback app. Head over to playback.tv/GiraffeNeckMark, because my guy Mark, that you guys know in the Mets community, will be hosting our latest watch party live stream. We're going to be doing it through his platform more than we will be doing on mine. We flip-flop, but easier on his as well, because he has other Mets creators that I'm friends with as well that he brings in there too. Just an easier transition, so that way I can go from there to my post-game shows, because I'm the only creator in the group that does this, that does a post-game directly after the game. So it makes it a little bit easier for me. So head over to playback.tv/GiraffeNeckMark tomorrow to watch us live in real time, go through the pain, the misery, or the excitement, and everything else in between in Mets land as they get set for that Game 1 of that Chicago Cubs series. We'll be starting right around the game begins. We'll have post-game coverage for you guys tomorrow. The following days, you guys will have more video content, post-game content. You may have more segments from yours truly with the New York Post. You will have daily segments from me in the Bleacher Report app, recapping every single win or loss for the Mets. We'll be having segments on Thursday as well, recorded to upload either Thursday evening or Friday, of MLB miscellaneous topics in the Bleacher Report app as well. And beyond that, everybody, I just want to thank you again so much for taking the time to watch live on a replay. I really do appreciate it. I am now going to defer the remaining 10-15 minutes of the live show at minimum, if not longer, to answer whatever comments, questions, or concerns you guys have for me today. So to everybody that watched on replay, thank you so much. I apologize for being a little bit more long-winded than I otherwise hoped to be today, but please know it's in good reason, just because I got a lot to say about this Mets team. I'm very passionate about this Mets team, and I've covered them and I've talked about them every single day, literally all year long. all year long. There has not been a single day that I haven't talked about the Mets for the most part. Even if there has been a live stream or a video, I talk about it at home with friends or online on X or something along those lines. And as someone who has talked about them every single day, I have to tell you how bittersweet this week may be for me as someone who is not opposed to seeing the year come to an end if they really can't get it together, because then I just want change and I want immediate change. And I will be very adamant all season long and hitting that drum for change. At that same time, I'm really going to miss what has been a very eventful, a very enjoyable one-on-one interaction with each and every one of you throughout our post-game shows throughout the year. We cover every single game, and I don't take that lightly. I'm very proud of what I've been able to do on that front and how you guys have been so amazing and being reoccurring viewers and new viewers. But please know that I take not only great pride, but great appreciation to every single one of you that go out of your way to watch my content, especially through all the lows that we have seen over the past 3.5 months. So to each and every one of you, sincerely, thank you. I really do appreciate the support. Never forget that. And I look forward to continuing to make daily content for you guys, regardless on the status of this Mets team. I, like you guys, just hope that we can get something to be excited about, something to rally around, something to act like absolute doofuses on the live show about, something to make me voice crack and sound like a little bit more of a schoolgirl than I otherwise typically do, to know that it was going to be a fun end to an otherwise frustrating year. So with that being said, everybody, let's continue on now our live show to all of our live viewers, everybody watching on replay. Thank you so much, guys. Hit that like and subscribe button on your way out and let me know your biggest takeaways and thoughts as to this simple question. Do you have the answer? Will the New York Mets make playoffs?